Welcome back to another episode on the Boomer Bust channel. I'm your host Terry, and today doing an editorial talking about the NFL draft. We are 3 days, I guess, technically 48 hours away. So like right at 7 o'clock. So technically 2 days away. I'm super excited. It's my favorite time of the year, one of my favorite times of the year. I would have to sit and think about it, but it's probably up there. It's definitely top three. And so I think every year I do kind of like closing thoughts. Every year I open up kind of, reflecting on process. So it's just an exciting time. And I just wanted to just talk about the draft. I mean, I have some basic areas where I want to go, but nothing too scripted. And I know that up top, I should say, if you haven't listened before, you knew. I love the draft. If you've listened before, you know I love the draft. That might not be your thing, especially a lot of people are Bears fans, and they want to hear about the Bears. And typical fans just want to hear about their team and who they picking. But that's not how I operate. That's not why I created the channel. None of that. I love the entire draft. Been doing this for a very long time. So I just want to kind of talk about my observations of the draft space. And then I want to talk a little bit about this draft. And then I'll get into kind of specifics of the Bears and all that. But yeah, so in general, man, the draft is it's an interesting animal within itself. But I think now that I'm older and I'm starting to map out my professional career and some of the other things that I do on the side, I realize now that I am very analytical minded. And so the idea of evaluating and processing and all that, it's been in my DNA whether I knew it or not. And, that's essentially what the draft is. And it makes it so fun just because there is a subjective nature to it. A lot of it is subjective, I should say. And the cool thing about the NFL this year, or not this year, but in this generation, is that the game has opened up a little more. Now, unfortunately, that has taken away from certain areas of the game and certain positions, but it's also opened up other areas too. And I don't know that I could say one is better than the other necessarily. I think the rules are way worse now, and that influences the game too much. But in terms of like the actual game itself, I can't say one is better or not. I grew up in the era where it was a lot of variety, and a lot of people that are college fans, you'll remember a time where not each team, but there was a lot of teams that had their own specific brand of football. And it's because there are so many ways to kind of skin a cat, if you want to use an old phrase. Because I got into actually coaching and like learning the game in 2010. So this was right before the breakout, like, of the spread, or at least in terms of like the proliferation of it. So you had some teams that were spread. You obviously had the old school single wing, triple wing, single option football. You had teams that were 21 pro personnel, ground and pound. You had the run and shoot. You had a lot of different things. And so I personally believe that that's just kind of how football is. There's no one thing that will make you win. It's kind of the same thing in any sport, any team sport, I should say. If you if you want to say, hey, you don't have the guys to spread out on defense and cover, a spread attack. Yeah, okay, but also you won't be able to run the ball up the middle, and you won't be able to get tough yards. So it's a give and take. It's a chess game. And so I just say all that to say that I just feel like even though the game has kind of started to get to a point where a lot of these teams look the same, I still feel like that there's just so many different flavors and ideas and philosophies, and that's what makes the draft so unique, is that we can look at this in a certain way from a lot of point of views, whether it be how we evaluate a position, whether it be how we, value a position, depending on what type of scheme we might like and everything. And all those things factor into how we evaluate these players, which makes it such a unique thing. Like, I mean, obviously you got the media, but people that either do this for online content or just do it for fun, or people that are in the periphery of the NFL. So there's people that write up reports for scouts. There's people that write articles and other stuff for websites. So you don't have to be either in the NFL or in the media. There's other spaces. So for anyone that does it, we're talking about the bigger picture for these teams. They have a very specific discussion. This roster, this scheme, this coach, how does this player fit? But for us, we have to look at the bigger picture. And so obviously that means a lot more players, a lot more, kind of nebulous discussions, because we don't have a specific situation to fit them into. And so by the time if you put in so much work into it, at least for me, by the time it comes to draft day, it's a celebration, to be honest. It's a celebration. Like, we did it again. We just made a big push because it's a lot of work, especially when I do it the way I want to do it, which hasn't been in a little bit. It's been a handful of years since I've been able to give to the process what I want to, but once you do, it is such a relief to get to draft day, just to be done, just, to take a deep breath. But also, it's cool to just see how it all plays out. So yeah, I reflect on those things a lot, at least in terms of like why I like the draft and all those things. There's just so many components. And again, if you listened to me before, I talk about the two different concepts. There's the draft game and there's building a roster. And when you talk about the media and the mock drafts and all those discussions, you get into the draft game a lot, especially with the mock drafts and mock draft simulators. By the way, I know some people might have realized like I've done that more than I usually do, and I say mock drafts are useless, and I pretty much agree with that still. Like, it was so funny that these people, because it's the week of the draft, so many of these people were like, here's my final mock, and then like an hour later, Zach Wilson gets traded to the Broncos. Now, there's people that are like, well, the Broncos are still going to get a quarterback. And they very much might. But to trade up for one after you just traded for Zach Wilson just seems very unlikely to me. So it's just those things that, like, mock drafts don't really matter. But the simulators, I think that's a little bit of a different thing, and it's definitely more of a game. But anyway, you might have noticed that I've been talking about that more because back in my day, not too long ago, there was only one simulator. There was only one simulator, and it wasn't that great. And honestly, that wasn't around that long. And so I happened to look this year, and there's so many simulators now. And obviously, with AI and technology in general, it's gotten better. So I'm just like, okay, cool. Like, I like that. So the one I use has been interesting, just, to give yourself some scenarios. But for the most part, actual, like, somebody writing down the mock draft, it don't matter. It don't really matter. So, but anyway, that's the mock draft game, or the draft game, I should say. The draft game is economics. We talking about supply and demand. We talking about positional value. We're talking about, again, like, did you get the guy ranked at a certain position versus where you got them, or if you got picks, like, did you get the value on the draft chart, or not the draft chart, the trade chart, and like all that crap. Like, and that I won't say doesn't matter. It's definitely part of the whole draft exercise and experience, but it's nowhere near as important as building a roster. Like, that is what matters. And I put out a post the other day, and by the way, I delete a lot of the community posts because you can't pin anything, and I don't want things that are actually important to get buried. So if it's something that especially if it's game day, but if it's something I throw out and we kind of move past it, I'll delete it. But I put this out there. I actually might have been today, but I put out this post and I was just like, everybody talks about mock drafts, but nobody talks about depth charts. And and that is it's the truth. I think about my friend, who obviously I won't say his name, but I mentioned before, I have a friend that is now in the NFL space, in the front office space, and we met a long time ago, and he was just, he was still, he's younger than me, so he was just a young college kid at the time, but we were part of the same football forum online and everything. And we would do this mock draft game. It was this like giant thing where, typically we try to get one person to represent a team, but over the years it died out. So some people had to take 4 teams, whatever. But anyway, I was the only person that really was talking like draft. And I think that game got him into it, but either way, he got into it. He reached out to me and we built a friendship over that. And so anyway, throughout his journey at one point, and he was still young, I asked him, I was like, so like, what do you think of this player that he really liked? Or how do you think he's doing this year? And he basically was just like, I don't watch NFL football. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, you don't, at least, he like, I prefer college or whatever. Okay. Do you track it? Like, no, I don't. And I'm just like, what do you mean you don't follow these players? Like, you are claiming to be in the draft world. You're not following these players. And he was just like, that's not part of my process. And I don't think it should be. So we argued about that playfully. And down the road, when he got older and he really got into space, he said that was stupid and everything. So he admitted that. But that's truly what happens in the draft game space. There are people that really get caught up in what's going to happen with the draft. And after the draft, they wipe their hands, dust it off, and take a little break. And then they're talking about the prospects for this upcoming college season. And I'm just like, to one point I get it. Like, if you're a Mel Kiper, he does that. Now, obviously, Mel actually follows what happens, but Mel Kiper does that. He says he takes a little break, then he's on to the top 50 for next year. So if you're paid by ESPN to only do the draft stuff, I get it, but still, I just feel like anybody that calls yourself an evaluator, how could you not look at the final product? How would you ever grow in your process if you don't even know, like, I really like this guy, I'll bang the table for this guy, this guy is this, and then you don't even watch what happens in his career. So that concept exists, though. There are people out there that are just here for the mock drafts. They're here to rank players. They're here to, do grades after the draft. And again, the grade, no one has played football. The grade is literally just who did you get and when? Because we didn't think he was supposed to go there, so you reach. Or we didn't think that person would be there. You got a value. That's the mock draft game. Or I keep saying mock draft. Sorry, that's the draft game. and it has its place. But really, what's important is the building of the roster. So when I say that these people talk about mock drafts, but then they don't talk about depth charts, it's for a lot of these people, especially in the media. I'm like, you don't care about this prospect. You just care about trying to be right in the mocks or trying to be right in the draft season. Like, the point is not about the draft or like where you get drafted. Like, I don't care. And obviously there's repercussions and ramifications. We all know that. But in general, that isn't the point. I don't really care. Like, if I get a all pro anything, I don't really care what it is, but I get all pro left tackle. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh well, you got him in the second round and really he was rated as a third round. No. Like, the impact matters. So for me, the draft does wrap up the process to an extent, but really the wrap up is before week 1 or when training camp is done or whenever they have to release their unofficial depth charts. That's when I really wrap up the draft process. Cause and that's why I don't or I wouldn't say that, but that's why I've changed my habits with a lot of stuff. And again, I mentioned the other day, there is the technical side of football and all of that some people don't have. But mostly, like I said, the biggest difference between me and anybody else, and especially because I know people, like I mentioned, I know people that never play football, and they're scouts and all that stuff. The biggest difference between people like us that are in it and that are around the draft game versus just the casual person is the mistakes. And to be funny enough, I heard Mel Kiper mention that like this week, I think. And so, but yeah, we're on the same page with that. Like, that's the biggest tool you have is the mistakes. Like, and I talk a lot about Dan Orlovsky, who is obviously just kind of really getting into the rotation as a popular talking head. So this is the first time I seen him really do draft. And I had to critique him a lot because there's a difference between knowing football and knowing how to scout and evaluate. And it all comes down to, again, what the purpose is. And I think a lot of these times people worry more about the draft game than they are about the actual football. So all that to say that, again, what the difference is that, yeah, Dan played the position and you could say he wasn't great, whatever. It could be Peyton Manning. The difference between Peyton Manning and a 20-year scout who never played football is all the repetition and the mistakes that he got to learn from. You got to learn from the very easy traps that people fall into when scouting. And I talk all the time about Dan Orlovsky and his Jaden Daniels versus Caleb Williams. Now, as I said before, Jaden isn't like way below Caleb Williams to me, but I do have Caleb higher, and I could listen to an argument for either one. But his whole argument is on tape, Jaden Daniels did NFL plays more. That's basically what his argument boils down to. And I'm like, again, we're not here to translate. We're here to project. So if you're just looking at, oh, he's not doing NFL plays, you're not doing your job. Because there's a ton of good players, a ton of Hall of Famers that I could point to and be like, in college, yeah, it didn't look like it looked in the NFL. So your job is to project, and that's just one of those common traps. So, yeah, that part of my process is important. Looking at the depth charts, but then obviously following the careers. But yeah, that's one of my favorite times because that's when, like, obviously people gonna try to get their laugh because they care more about the draft game. After the draft, ha ha, I told you my guy went second round. You said he wasn't that good. Ha ha, my guy went third round. Da da da. And I'm like, okay. But then come September, let's look at where your guy is for the team they went to. Like, are they sitting there buried under the depth chart, not going to play this year? Is this guy that wasn't a value or wasn't graded highly actually starting for the team? Like, those are the type of things that matter. And that's the other part of the draft, which is the actual football. It's the building of the roster. And a big part of that difference is that building a roster is looking at the context of what they're going into and how that is going to set them up to produce. When you're talking about the draft game, you're just talking about the individual. And that don't matter. It really don't matter. Like, and I'll use a wild example because that's, one of the best ones out there, the 49ers. We could say anybody really, but receiver, tackle, obviously quarterback, running back, like whatever, cornerback, whatever you want to call it. Okay, I'm a DN and I get drafted to the 49ers in the 6th round and I got a chance to start whatever. Do you think that's more important, or is it more important that this player got drafted in the 2nd round by a team that has no defense, and I'm not going to be coached that great, and I'm not really going to have a lot of opportunities to open me up for pass rushes? Like, that's the draft game versus building a roster. That's the stuff that don't really, matter versus the actual production on the field. And so, that's one of that's probably the biggest conceptual discussion I could have about the draft. But as I look at the current landscape, man, draft has definitely become more popular by design. I was disappointed in the NFL. I originally was thinking about going to Detroit because it's not that far, and I love the draft, and I love to be there again. If you haven't followed me back in the day, I started. I'm trying to think. Trubisky. No, Trubisky was after. So yeah, I started this after I went to the draft, but the first draft outside of New York, Music City Hall in like forever was in Chicago. First two actually, so they were there 2 years in a row, and I was lucky enough to volunteer and work both of those. And I was all over, man. It was amazing. I've been reflecting on that recently. It was absolutely amazing. But I was there, so I love that stuff. I wanted to go, and they had like, from what I could understand, because like I guess I was a volunteer in Chicago, so it was a little different. But I just feel like after all these years of going from city to city, they would communicate better. But to best of my knowledge, it said, "Hey, sign up and on the app, and we'll let you know." It texts me back, "Hey, we'll let you know if you get one of these general admission tickets." And I never got message back, so I didn't know what that was. So eventually I was digging into the website, and I somehow got to this like event ticket thing, and it's different events, but the draft was one, and most of the stuff was sold out, but the prices were insane. So I was very confused because I was still getting ads saying, "Hey, want to go to the draft? Sign up now." Now, I've been to the draft enough where I know they have the activations. So they call it, well, I don't know what they call it now, but they call it Draft Town in Chicago. So they bring out all the big giant helmets. They have like all these different things. They got like the booth with all the Super Bowl rings and trophies. They got they usually have like some players from the home team around, not like current players, but well, no, Kyle Long was there. He was a current player, but they have like, kind of like B-list, D-list players, and they're signing autographs, and that's where they had all the different setups, ESPN, NFL Network, all that different stuff. And so That's what they kind of call draft town. There's music, there's food, blah blah blah. It's kind of where you take the kids. They do the Play 60 activations, all that stuff. The actual draft itself was, inside a venue, and they have an outside venue in Chicago. They did, and they also had an inside venue where the stage was and all that. So yeah, and those were free though. Like it was a lottery and some other thing, but it was free. But I was looking at this site and it was just like round one was super expensive, but they were sold out. And then like rounds 2 to 3. And so I was like, man, they really monetized the draft. Like naive me, I'm thinking they want to spread the love. I mean, you already getting money. You bringing money to the city. Obviously, the city's gonna pay you something to host it. Like, there's ways to make money, and I did not think they were gonna turn it into this, but I should have. So I was disappointed in that. I'm not sure what the free tickets were. If that was just to the activations, I don't know if you could actually want a ticket to be in the room on during the first round, but all that to say, the draft has become very popular. It's been very commoditized. Is that a word? But yeah, man, that was a little disappointing. But all that to say, draft is popular. So we know the mock drafts have just become more popular. As I said, the simulators are out there. You got the fantasy people getting involved. You got everybody just having an opinion, which is sports media in general. Hey, I don't know nothing about scouting. Hey, I might not even be from football. I might be a basketball analyst, but I'm gonna say, hey, Caleb Williams should go here, or I'll take Jaden Dent. And it's just like, again, trying to feed the media 24-hour cycle. So it's just, there's a lot of stuff that I think gets thrown out there. There's a lot of discussion. It muddies the water a little bit, but people are very excited. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of been a regular trend. But I get more on social media these days. I wasn't before, so I know this stuff was out there. But again, everybody just kind of has a platform to kind of talk their opinion. And I talk all the time about the way in society we converse. So you get a lot of people in the last, I don't know, 5, 6 years, probably even less than that, where the thing to do now is, if you don't like an opinion, oh, it's fake news. Oh, you're an idiot. Oh, you're this. You're paid off. So people go real crazy over their opinions. The discourse is kind of whatever. But yeah, man, I guess the current state of the draft, it's cool to me. I do think having newer voices and everything is not a bad thing, but I do wish there was more of a little bit of vetting going on, because it's just weird to me that the number of people that will sit here and tell me that I'm not qualified or my opinion doesn't matter because I'm not an NFL scout. And I'm like, so how does that make your opinion valid? You don't even do what I do. So what does that make you? I just don't understand. And obviously, it's the internet. One thing I do notice that I don't really love is that, again, you got these talking heads in the media that are doing this, and they're newer. And Mel Kiper is kind of the sage veteran, but you got a guy like Mike Mayock that isn't back with NFL Network. He was another voice. Todd McShay, ESPN got rid of him in the cost cuts. Another logical voice. So really, all there is Mel, and then you got all these new guys, and they're really obsessed with being right. That's what I've noticed. They kind of obsess over being right in their mock drafts, which goes back to my original conversation that, like, the draft game don't matter. It's about the actual football. So that's a disturbing trend. Obviously, you got sports betting. I was just looking at the props today, and that's fine. you want to bet on something or you want to watch a betting show to talk about props to bet on, that's fine. But in terms of like the content and like the skill of the actual activity, it's not about trying to be right with your mock drafts. And so I always like Mel, and he gets a lot of haters for some reason, but I'm glad to have him still because he's one of the only voices still talking sanities. Like, bro, you're not gonna hit if you're afraid to take a shot. That's what he say, and it's true, man. It's like people won't put their names on stuff. Like people will be like, oh, Mel Kiper said this, or my Mel Kiper said this about that player that aged well, and it's just like Mel's not running from it. Like he'll be like, yeah, I thought this, and this is why I thought this, which is more than any of these other people can say. That's the point of the evaluation. You have the evaluation, and then you have the rationale behind the evaluation. If you cannot give the rationale behind your evaluation, then how can you ever improve? And again, that's the number one thing for a scout. It ain't about getting a pick right on a mock draft. It's about how do you self improve? How do you do the meta analysis of assessing your assessment? And so that's the thing. You get guys that are scared. They're trying to force their big boards and their mock drafts around, and they're trying to do all these things to be right. And it's like, that's not the point. The point is about the player. And yes, if you feel a player is something, stand on it. And then you watch the draft, figure out you wrong. Okay, let me go back and see what they saw. And then, more importantly, you see what they do in the league. And then you really can make an evaluation. So yeah, man, that's just kind of what's going on in the draft world these days. Much like the rest of media, people just trying to fill time and all that. So this particular draft, that's one of the most exciting things to me, man. I talk about a lot of different concepts. One concept you'll probably hear me talk about is that it's not going to be the same correlation every year. And what I mean by that is that, oh, you're a top 3 pick. Just because you're a top 3 pick in your draft doesn't mean you be a top 3 pick in most drafts. And that's that discussion that happens every year that people get way too caught up in. And honestly, one of the quickest ways to let me know you're a casual, like a great example this year is Dallas Turner. This is a super weak defensive draft, and it's not a good edge rush draft. Like the top 3 guys, you got top 3 guys and they're iffy. So there's going to be some questions about Latu, which we talked about. There's some questions about Dallas Turner. And then there's some big questions about Chop Robinson. I happen to like all 3. In a typical draft, would I say they are top 3 prospects? Absolutely not. So you got those 3. But then after that, it falls off a cliff. A huge cliff. And so there's just so many different flavors every year. That's what makes the draft fun. And so I look at this year, and I'll say, for me, I'd rather have no top guys and a lot of like solid prospects. Like, 8 to 10 solid prospects. That's to me more attractive than, hey, let me have no consensus top guys and also let me have no guys that I really want to take after the first 3. That's a seriously weak draft. So that's the case this year. You got Dallas Turner. And so labeled to some people number 1 defender, or the first defender to come off the board, or the number 1 edge prospect. And that sounds sexy in a headline, but when you're talking about the actual draft class, that's when you get into the nuance. And so again, that's one of the quickest ways to let me know you're casual when people start talking about, well, this number one prospect at his position, or he's gonna be a top 10 pick. And it's just like that's not evidence of anything. That's only evidence of the draft class. And so you look at this year, just a really, really rough defensive draft class. You come into it, obviously, Caleb Williams. Now, what's funny to me is I hear some people talking about next year and Shador and all that. And it was just literally the same thing last year. Last year, who were the quarterbacks last year? I can't even remember off the top of my head. But last year, oh yeah, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, all those guys. You had a lot of people talking about, well, just wait till next year. And I'm like, hey, Bryce Young, quality, high quality prospect. I'm talking about CJ Stroud, high quality prospect. Levis, interesting. Different quarterbacks. Or of course Anthony Richardson, he shot up. Very interesting decision to make with Anthony Richardson. And while we're talking about that, people are just like, wait till next year. Wait till next year. Oh, wait till next year. So now we get here, and obviously Caleb Williams, A plus prospect. Jaden Daniels, A plus prospect, quality prospect. Drake May, interesting discussion. Was supposed to be an A plus prospect. You got all this stuff, and people wait till next year, wait till next year. So that's funny. But anyway, you come into this draft right away. Caleb Williams. After the Heisman, you had Jaden Daniels in that discussion. So you like, whoa, okay, we got a guy that possibly might sneak into the top 10 with Caleb and Drake May. Lo and behold, oh no, it's a lot deeper than that. And then you got Drake May, this next Justin Herbert guy. And it's just like, okay. And at one point, Bo Nix, Michael Penix. And so you're like, okay, man, we got, quarterback talk. That's every draft. Then Marvin Harrison Jr. Marvin Harrison Jr. Wait till Marvin Harrison Jr. Wait till Marvin Harrison Jr. So you get into this class, you're like, okay, Marvin Harrison's finally out. Looks like a stud. Let's go. Maybe not to me the same level that everybody else was talking. Like everybody was complaining about Caleb being called a generational prospect or an elite prospect. And there was so many complaints. I was like, but ain't nobody bat an eye when they was like, Marvin Harrison is generational prospect, best prospect since Calvin Johnson. I'm like, what? So I watch him again. Stud, like cool. Then you like, man, Neighbors. Okay, hold on. That's very different. We ain't seen that really outside of Tyreek Hill. Then Odunze, they go on their run. And you like, okay, Odunze, then people dig into that more. Then you hear, okay, no, this receiver class is deep. And it's like, okay, yes, legitimate 12 receivers deep. Let's go. And so quickly you get into like, this is so much offense. The tackles with Olu and John Alt, or Joe Alt, sorry. And then with Olu, it's like, for me, I'm like, yeah, not really what I feel that everybody else feels. But then I'm like, all these other tackles, though, they still legit. So we got like 10 tackles. I'm like, man. So quickly you like, this is an offensive draft. Even if there was a Sauce Gardner or who's the last really good edge prospect we had? Nick Bosa. But anyway, even if there's a guy like that, it's like, yeah, that's one. But the vast majority of this draft pool is offensive people. And then you start digging into it and you like, oh, not only is there no elite defenders, it's just not a good class. So I've been talking about that for the longest, and it's just going to make things very interesting. Quarterbacks get pushed up every year. I say that. That's been happening for a long time. But what to do with elite receivers and elite tight ends? Because and I've talked about this before, the tight end position and a receiver position, they're not they're not positions you have to pick at a premium. To be honest, tight end almost seems like a position you don't want to pick at a premium. And again, for me, that's just going to look at who are the elite players or the top players and where did you get them. And receiver, you look in the top 15, however you rank it, they're all over the place. Yeah, you got a Jamar Chase that's like a top 10 pick, top 5 pick. But then you also got a Tyreek Hill. You got a Puka Nakua that just did what he did. You got a Stephon Diggs that won the first round pick. We got a lot of those discussions. You got Justin Jefferson, arguably the best receiver, was taken in the back of the first round. Like, so you don't have to get them at a premium for them to be great. Tight end, none of them were at a premium. The one that really was a premium was Kyle Pitts, and I think he'll turn up if Kirk Cousins stays healthy. But so far to this point, outside his rookie year, he didn't do enough for the casual fans to know he's elite. So you look at all that and you just like, okay, well, what's going to happen? Because these receivers are so deep. Not only are these three receivers by far some of the best prospects in the top 5, but on top of that, this class is so deep where, yeah, they might not be elite, but we can get good receivers into the middle end of the second round, if not the third round. So that makes the decisions kind of interesting because the quarterbacks are going to be the quarterbacks. Like JJ McCarthy surprises me, and him going top 5, I would have never called. But even still, if 4 quarterbacks go, it's not a super shocker. They're quarterbacks. So that sets the stage. As a lot of people say, the draft starts at 3 or at 4. And that's because the quarterbacks set the stage. That's going to be what it's going to be. They're half decent prospects. They're going to get pushed up. And these are better than half decent prospects. So after that, though, what do you do with these receivers? Now, again, had you had a Sauce Gardner, had you had, I don't know why I'm blanking, but any type of prospect that was decent, like a Trayvon Walker. Trayvon Walker in his draft, because of the Jags already having Trevor Lawrence, that's how that kind of happened. I wouldn't say that was necessarily a product of the draft per se, even though that was the year where the quarterback class was absolutely terrible. So that was part of it, but really is because they team didn't have a quarterback. Now, or they did have a quarterback. Now, if the Jags didn't have a quarterback, do you not believe there would have been some discussion about a Kenny Pickett or somebody trying to force something up? Not to say at number 1, but possibly moving back. Possibly. But they had a quarterback, so they ain't had that discussion. They took the guy they wanted. But you take a Trayvon Walker and you plop him into this draft, he's going top 5. He's going top 5 over Dallas Turner. And so it's one of those things. And Dallas Turner might be the Trayvon Walker of this draft. It's just one of those things that because of the way the class is shaped, the decisions are going to be different than the other drafts. And that's how it is every year. But it's going to be real interesting to me because it's a good case study. Running backs were already dime a dozen, individually devalued. And so you get a class where the running back class is not good at all. Because even no matter what we say about the position, Bijan still went top 10. You still had Jahmyr Gibbs go in the first round. So, like, clearly teams believe that, and you could say those teams, well, obviously, I don't know if you could say the Lions are dumb because they play really well, but you could say people are dumb, but teams still believe, okay, if the quality's there, we'll take it. So if we had a Bijan in this class, very interesting conversation, but the running backs are so bad. So it's like, hey, we don't even got to entertain that. But there's so many receivers. There's so many tackles. The corners aren't that great. Like, it's just, that's the makeup of this class. It's very offensive heavy. And all the players, not all, but the depth of the defense is in the secondary. So you got safeties that are really solid but not elite, and safeties don't tend to go early anymore anyway. And then on top of that, you got corners that aren't elite either. So, but they're the best the group of the defense has to offer. Excuse me. So it's just very interesting. It is usually, I think, a little bit more of a counterbalance in terms of offense and defense, where hey, it might be offensive heavy, but we got 3, 4 blue chip defensive guys. That's going to shake up the first 15 picks. We don't really have that this year. We really don't have that this year. And that's why I am almost, I wouldn't say guarantee at all. I would say I'm about 75% sure the Falcons are going to trade their pick because they happen to load up at a position where the draft is really strong at and they don't need, which is receiver. They could go tackle. It's possible, but they got a pretty solid O-line working. And they just had too many other needs. They have needs that aren't part of this draft class strength. So I just really feel like they're a candidate to trade down. And we'll see, because that'll impact my Bears. So that'll be unfortunate. But that's kind of what I'm feeling. Yeah, but it's a. I heard Mel Kiper say it's probably one of the most intriguing drafts that he's seen, and I do believe that, man. It's just really, it's a need versus the supply, and the demand versus supply, whatever. Where you got teams like the Titans, where it's like, man, there's one premium tackle, and we need tackles on both sides. There's one premium tackle, and then there's a lot of good tackles. But we also could use a receiver. We're trying to build up for our young quarterback and our new head coach. And there's premium receivers, multiple, probably by the time we pick. Or, well, probably not multiple, but there's going to probably be one. But there's so many other good receivers. So it's like, which way do they go? It reminds me a lot of the Cincinnati Bengals when they were discussing Jamar Chase and Penei Sewell. Now, obviously, most people moved on. They don't care. They're just like, yeah, Jamar Chase, you get the receiver for the quarterback who played with him. That wasn't the discussion. That wasn't the discussion in Cincinnati. That wasn't the discussion nationally. That wasn't the discussion in the scouting circles. It was a fierce debate of should they go tackle when you just had your franchise rookie quarterback show you how good he is, and then he got hurt because you couldn't protect him? Or do you get this slam dunk elite receiver prospect who he also played with in college? It was such a interesting decision. And again, that's why I'm like, a lot of people hype up the draft, but they're casuals, man. Once the pick is, I'm telling you, if 1 through 5 all pick with no trades, the draft's gonna get real uninteresting real fast. People get so frenzied with all the possible trades, and then they forget about it. And again, people in the draft circle will look back. We'll talk about all the different things that could have happened and relate it to how it applies now. But the casual fan doesn't. They don't remember. They just move on. Who did we draft? That's all I care about. And so, yeah, you could look back and be like, yeah, of course take Jamar Chase. No, that was not the conversation. So the Titans are in that situation. And then the Chargers, Jim Harbaugh and all that comes with him. 2 top receivers in the league, or 2 top 25, 30, whatever receivers in the league. You let go. You got the young stud quarterback, but you just let all his weapons go. There's premium receivers here. You got to take one, right? But you're trying to build a team, and your philosophy isn't receiver heavy. what do they do? And so it's just so many good, interesting choices that after Thursday people won't care about, but up until now, it's like so much of possibility of what could happen. Obviously, with my Bears, and I'm sure a lot of other people are looking. Obviously, the mystery with number one is gone, but it's like, what do you do with a second top 10 pick? And if we had 8 picks, it wouldn't even be a discussion. But we only have 4 picks in the whole draft. But we've been stacking in all season. We going for Caleb. You could give him another top 10 pick to get him one of the best supporting cast out there. Do you trade back and try to load up? It's so many interesting, decisions that are possible. So I feel like this draft is super intriguing. And I'm really excited about day 2. I've been saying this whole time the value of this draft outside of the top 10, maybe top 8, maybe top 7, but outside of the top 8, the value of this draft is in the second and third round. So I cannot wait. I was thinking about this the other day. There's going to be a team, or I should say, there's going to be 3 to 6 teams that come out of this draft with a whole new look on their offensive weapons. There's just so many good receivers. Like Malachi Corley, not only does he have I would say probably a little more souped up athleticism than Deebo Samuel, but he also benefits from Deebo Samuel laying the game plan and foundation for him. So you get to a team, it's not like, oh man, you can't really run an out route, or oh man, you can't understand these plays. It's like, no, we know exactly what we're going to do for you to get you going in this offense. And that is so different than what a Lad McConkey gives you. And it's so different than what a Roman Odunze gets you. And so some team, or not some, again, 3 to 4, 3 to 6 teams are going to walk away with multiple of these receivers. And if you don't have a receiving core and you bring in Marvin Harrison Jr., and then later on you're able to pair him, let's just say, with a Jermaine Burton out of Alabama, who has excellent start-stop ability, who has excellent toughness and all that. Or you're able to pair him with a Lad McConkey, or you're able to pair him with a Ricky Pearsall. You already changed the dynamics of your offense. But imagine you're a team that already has somebody. That's why it's so intriguing for the Bears, because it's like you not just saying, hey, Rome Odunze, you're Calvin Johnson, take over the Lions. No, you're getting in the middle of Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. That one pick has changed our offense. And so there's going to be teams that get a couple of these receivers and it's going to change their offense. It's going to completely change it. And so I'm excited to see which of those teams are going to be, where these people end up. There are some quarterbacks that are going to be happy with some of their picks. More than likely, the tackle, the foundation of the tackle position in the league is about to jump up really high. Even if you got a guy like Fashanu, who I think needs a lot of coaching and might need a year. Even if you got a guy like Sua Matea, who needs a lot of coaching, might need a year. Mims, who might need 2 years. I don't know. Guyton. Even if those guys do sit, or even if those guys have to play guard, like it's in the year or two, it's about to change the floor, because we're going to lose Trent Williams eventually. Tyron Smith seems to be bouncing back, but we know his history. You're probably going to lose him. And so we already lost Whitworth. We're handing it over to the new guard, and we needed this influx of tackles. So it's just going to be exciting, man. There's a lot of, and obviously the NFL is about betting. It's about fantasy. It's about points. So people love offense. So it's going to be a lot of injection of offensive talent into this league, and it's going to be cool. And I can't wait for that. So, I mean, I feel like a lot of this stuff has been covered. especially without people, asking me questions or whatever. I'm gonna stay on y'all about that. I love y'all, but man, come on, engage. So without, specific questions, I feel like a lot of stuff has been covered. The top three quarterbacks, what's the difference? How do you rank them? The top three receivers, what's the difference? How do you rank them? The Dallas Turner question, the Latu kind of question. Um, yeah, just the defense question in general. Like, what's this defense? What's this draft look like? And I feel like we covered a lot of that. The JJ McCarthy. I would have to guess he's going in the top 10. I don't agree with it. Why it's happening, I'm not exactly sure. I have a better idea, but I just don't agree with it. So, yeah, I feel like we covered a lot of that stuff, man. Again, it happens every year, but I would really say this year, Friday is going to be the day. Friday is going to be the day because as bad as the defenders are, it's going to be a question. We might not want a receiver or have that as a high need, but these are the best prospects on the board. So are we going to have the runner receivers between round 1 and 2? And just everybody stocking up in round 2, or are people going to reach on other players? Darius Robinson, Jayless, was it Hunt? That probably won't be till later. Dwayne Carter, all these other guys. Are people going to reach on safeties and D linemen in the premium positions just because they say, okay, this is a position in need, that's what we're going to go with? Or are we just going to see a complete explosion over the first 3 rounds of offense? So that's going to tell you a lot. But obviously, a lot of people don't care about rounds 4 through 7. But I think in particular this year is really going to leave a lot to desire because the action is absolutely in rounds 2 to 3. Don't get me wrong. First round is going to set the stage. It's going to set the stage. But what your team complements that first round with is going to be the discussion down the line. So, yeah. I mean, I said I was going to talk about the Bears. I don't know that I need to. I've been talking this whole time. Nothing has changed with me, man. I love Joe Alt. I love uh I love Roma Dunze. And I feel like if we're going to be able to get one of those guys that are premium, I'm cool with it. And just go for it. I mean, that's a quality versus quantity question, depending on the trade. Because again, I've been doing the mock draft simulators, and sometimes you get some crazy trades. And so, most of the time, if I could get multiple second round picks or multiple picks on day 2, I'm probably trading back. Um, Typically, that's if Odunze and Alt are gone. But sometimes Odunze has been there and I traded back because the offer was too good. Because I firmly believe that if you can stock up on day 2, you're going to be a happy person. Because something's going to fall. Between Knicks and Penix, they're going to push some more players back into the second round. And like I said, these receivers, some of these second round guys are off the charts, like a Xavier Leggett, like potentially a Adonai Mitchell, Keon Coleman, Lad McConkey, Pearsall, just like excellent prospects. Then on top of that, a lot of good tackles. I think Akiran, I just remembered his name today. I forgot, but out of Yale, I think he's an excellent potential project. Not even project. I really think he could turn around and be really good as a late round tackle. But then you got the other Washington tackle. You got Blake Fisher out of Notre Dame, Joe Alt's partner. You got Van Pran out of Georgia, which a lot of people not talking about. You got just a lot of good offensive line prospects, and I love Cam Kinchins. I like Tyler Nubin too, but I think Cam Kinchins is going to be an absolute steal because the safety class not great. People don't value safeties, but he ran a slow 40. I get it. But watch the film, man. Just watch the film. The man can go from middle of the field to the sideline like a pro. He's going to be a steal. I think Cole Bishop is going to be great. James Williams, also out of University of Miami, has a lot of underrated buzz about potentially becoming like a Fred Warner type linebacker, converting from safety. Then on top of that, you got Dwayne Carter. A lot of people talking about a defensive tackle. I think Vondre Sweat is going to be better than people give him credit for. Chop, I don't know if Chop's going to fall to the second round, but he might. And I think Chop is a great pick there too. So it's just, I mean, day 2 and 3, or sorry, rounds 2 and 3. I think it's gonna be good for the getting. It's definitely gonna be good for the getting. So anyway, that's it for me. Go down comment section. Let me know what you think. Share it around. Get the conversation started. And thank you for listening.